Prabhupada Paramahansa Parivajikacharya, Asta Saraswati Sri Maharaj Divine Grace of Hari Charanand Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Skandi Vidhi Founder Charges Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Sri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the Summit Devotees. All glories to the Summit Devotees. All glories to the Summit Devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Padastai Bhagavate Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Nitanamani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Bachani Nirshesha Shunyavadi Pastatari Chatarine. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, we're having the third canto, chapter 16, entitled Jai and Vijay Cursed by the Sages, text number 26. But we don't have it on the board. Does everyone else has, or those who have the verse anyway? Please repeat. 26. Sri Bhagavanu Vacha Etau Sure Taragatim Patipadya Sadhya Etau Sure Taragatim Patipadya Sadhya Sangramba Sambrita Samadjanubhu Badha Jogau Bhuyasakasam upayasayata Bhuyasakasam upayasyata ashuyova Shapo mayaiva nimitas tadaveta vipraha Sri Bhagavanu Vacha Etau Sure Taragatim Pratipadya Sadhya Sangramba Sambrita Samadhyanubadha Jogau Bhuyasakasam upayasayata ashuyova Shapo mayaiva nimitas taraveta vipra. Anyone else? Sri Bhagavanu Vacha Etau Sureta Ragatim Pativaja Sadhya Sangramba Sambrita Samadhanubadha Jogau Bhuya Sakasam Upayasyata Ashuyova Shapo Mayaiva Nimitas Taraveta Vipra.
Chapter 16, text 26.
Anyone else? Etau Sureta Ragatim Pratipadya Sadhya Sangramba Sambrita Samadhanubhada Jogau Bhuyak Sakasam Upayasyata Ashuyova Shapo mayaiva nimitastarabeta vipra. Please repeat. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha. The Supreme Personality of Godhead replied. Etao, these two doorkeepers. Sura Ittara, demoniac. Gatim, the womb. Patipadya, obtaining. Sadya, quickly. Sangramba, by anger. Sambrita, intensified. Samadhi, concentration of mind. Anubadha, firmly. Yoga, united with me. Bhuya, again. Sakasham, to my presence. Upayasyata, shall return. Ashu, shortly. Ya, which. Va, of you. Shapa, curse. Maya, by me. Eva, alone. Nimitta, ordained. Tat, that. Aveta, no. Vipra, O Brahmanas. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Shri Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. The Lord replied, O Brahmanas, know that the punishment you inflicted on them was originally ordained by me, and therefore they will fall to a birth in a demoniac family. But they will be firmly united with me in thought, through mental concentration intensified by anger, and they will return to my presence shortly. Please repeat. The Lord replied, O Brahmanas, know that the punishment you inflicted on them was originally ordained by me, and therefore they will fall to a birth in a demoniac family. But they will be firmly united with me in thought, through mental concentration intensified by anger, and they will return to my presence shortly. Purport. The Lord stated that the punishment inflicted by the sages upon the doorkeepers Jai and Vijay was conceived by the Lord Himself. Without the Lord's sanction, nothing can happen. It is to be understood that there was a plan in the cursing of the Lord's devotees in Vaikuntha, and His plan was explained by many stalwart authorities. The Lord sometimes desires to fight. The fighting spirit also exists in the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, how could fighting be manifested at all? Because the Lord is the source of everything, anger and fighting are also inherent in His personality. When He desires to fight with someone, He has to find an enemy. But in the Vaikuntha world, there is no enemy, because everyone is engaged fully in His service. Therefore, He sometimes comes to the material world as an incarnation in order to manifest His fighting spirit. In Bhagavad Gita 4:8, also it is said that the Lord appears just to give protection to the devotees and to annihilate the non-devotees. The non-devotees are found in the material world, not in the spiritual world. Therefore, when the Lord wants to fight, He has to come to this world. But who will fight with the Supreme Lord? No one is able to fight with Him. Therefore, because the Lord's pastimes in the material world are always performed with His associates, not with others, He has to find some devotee who will play the part of an enemy. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says to Arjuna, My dear Arjun, both you and I have appeared many, many times in this material world, but you have forgotten, whereas I remember. Thus, Jai and Vijay were selected by the Lord to fight with him in the material world. And this was the reason the sages came to see him, and accidentally the doorkeepers were cursed. It was the Lord's desire to send them to the material world, but not perpetually, but for some time. Therefore, just as on a theatrical stage, someone takes the part of enemy to the proprietor of the stage, although the play is for a short time, and there is no permanent enmity between the servant and the proprietor, so the Surajanas, devotees, were cursed by the sages to go to the Asurajana, or atheistic families. That a devotee should come into an atheistic family is surprising, but it is simply a show. After finishing their mock fighting, both the devotee and the Lord are again associated in the spiritual planets. That is very explicitly explained here. The conclusion is that no one falls from the spiritual world or Vaikuntha planet, for it is the eternal abode. But sometimes, as the Lord desires, devotees come into this material world as preachers or as atheists. In each case, we must understand that there is a plan of the Lord. Lord Buddha, for example, was an incarnation, yet he preached atheism. Quote unquote, there is no God. But actually there was a plan behind this, as explained in the Bhagavatam. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Militam Dena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namah. Gam Garodi Vachalam Pangam Langayate Ginimerki Vidamande Sri Gurum Dinataranam Paramananda Marvam Shidit Ishwaram. The Lord replied, O Brahmanas, know that the punishment you inflicted on them was originally ordained by me, and therefore they will fall to a birth in a demoniac family. But they will be firmly united with me in thought through mental concentration intensified by anger, and they will return to my presence shortly. So here we're very nicely hearing from the Lord himself, and further clarified by Srila Prabhupada in the purport, why things happen the way they do. Sometimes the question arises that when something happens, someone may ask, oh, who could have known, or we're shocked by something, or why did something have to happen now? The reality is that these things are going on by the supervision of the personality of Godhead, as pointed out here by himself, the Lord. But for the unintelligent and foolish persons, Naham Prakrisha Sarvasa Yoga Maya Samavrita, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that he's not manifest to foolish and unintelligent persons. So when they see something going on in the world, oh well, it's some accident, or it's by chance. But the reality is that it's all being controlled by the personality of Godhead. And unbeknownst to all of the conditioned souls, these things are going on by his direction, and there is a plan. Again, when someone comes in to a difficult condition in material life, or even a very favorable condition, we're wondering why did this have to happen, or this child was such an innocent child. It came into this world and immediately it leaves its body. These things are being controlled by the personality of Godhead. Upadeshnanu mantracha bharta bhukta maheshwara. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that he's the overseer and permitter. That we can try to do whatever we want to in this world to deal with the dualities, how to counteract this situation or another, try to enjoy in this material world and be frustrated. But there's another transcendental enjoyer. And that personality is the Supreme Lord, who is situated in the heart of all living beings. Ishvarak Parama Krishna, Satchidananda Krishna is there. Ishvarak Sarvabhutanam, he's in the heart of all living beings. And he's actually the one that's enjoying this whole experience. And he may make it available, makes himself available to the jivas, to all living, to all others. But he's the supreme proprietor. Again, it's not that it happens without his sanction, that someone becomes successful or that someone is in a distressed condition. It happens by his plan. He's the overseer. He's certainly observing everything that goes on. It's not that you can hide in some corner and, Krishna will not see what's going on. There's this old fable, I guess you could say, or old instruction that two servants of their spiritual master came before their guru, and his instruction was that I want you to go. I want you to take. I don't know how valid this is, but anyway, it's a story I heard that the guru spoke to these two disciples and instructed them that I want you to take this. I think it was a chicken. And I want you to go someplace and kill it. Someplace where no one will see and find out. So the one disciple went off into some distant place. He went into the woods and he performed this act, came back and told his guru. And the second disciple went off to some distant place again. He was looking here, looking there, and came back and he couldn't do it. And the guru was pleased by the one who came back with the live animal and was dissatisfied and very disturbed by the other disciple. The instruction was that, the understanding was that, of the second disciple, was that no matter where I go, because the spiritual master asked him, why didn't you fulfill this instruction? Because wherever I go, I'm feeling the presence of the Lord. How is it that I can go someplace where the Lord is not witnessing? So, the fact is that Krishna is the personality of Godhead, is there within the heart of all living. He's the overseer and permitter. He's seeing, he's quite aware of all of our activities, and he's permitting according to the desire of the living being. But the unintelligent, foolish persons are thinking that, well, this is just an accident, or it's happening by some natural cause. But no, Ekala Ishvara Krishna Arsabhritya, the Chaitanya Charitamrita explains to us that the personality of Godhead is alone the supreme controller, and all others are his servants, and they're dancing according to his direction, according to how he makes them do so. They dance. So it's not that again we have some special prerogative or ability. No, everything is being controlled by the personality of Godhead, and when it's in union with his desire, then we're properly situated. Then we're in the liberated state, right? What is that? Karmana manasagira iha yasya haye karma iha yasya hirdaye. How does that verse go? Karmana manasagira nikilasvya piyavastasu jivan muktasa uchate. That when all of our activities, our body, mind, and words are engaged in the service of the Lord, that is the safest and natural and original position of the living being. Otherwise, it's just confusion, it's darkness. But we're understanding from the pages of the Bhagavatam in this wonderful, very nice verse where the Lord himself says that he's directing everything. As he says in Bhagavad Gita, right? Prabhishtani, aprabhishtani, that he's within everything and he's without everything. He's existing within all circumstances and all conditions. And he's also outside of it, because again, he's the transcendental enjoyer. And when, as Prabhupada points out here, the Lord stated that the punishment inflicted by the sages upon the doorkeepers, Jai and Vijay, was conceived by the Lord himself. Who can conceive of such a activity? Who can conceive of such wonderful activities as are performed by the personality of Godhead? One of the qualities of Krishna described in Nectar of Devotion is that he's a performer of wonderful activities. In the Krishna book, there's a very nice chapter entitled "Wonderful Krishna," which describes the wonderful activities and qualities of the personality of Godhead. So who can conceive of such a happening where the Lord himself, through his direction, directs that his devotees should come into this material world to assist him, and because he wants to engage in certain incredible pastimes. When the Lord descends in these wonderful forms as Nrsingadev or Varaha or Kurma, all of these wonderful incarnations of the Lord, they're there because the Lord wants to experience certain enjoyments. So who else but him could conceive of such activities? Therefore he's called Achintya. That although he's within everything, and although he can manifest himself in the smallest degree right? Anur, Aniya, Mahato, Mahiyan. He can manifest himself as the smallest of the small, yet he's the greatest of the great. This is the inconceivable position of the personality of Godhead. And that all of these things are happening again by his sanction. As Prabhupada points out here, that without the Lord's sanction, nothing can happen. It is to be understood that there was a plan in the cursing of the Lord's devotees in the Vaikuntha, and his plan is explained by many stalwart authorities. Sometimes the Lord desires to fight, and that fighting spirit also exists in the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, how could fighting be manifested at all? So, sometimes we're amazed again that things may happen in the material world, that there may be fighting, or there may be a play happening. The Lord is also very playful. The Lord is also wanting to exhibit loving exchanges with devotees. So who else but he could conceive of such wonderful things? And when the Lord desires to do such things, as Prabhupada points out here, he directs his devotees. Because again, who could fight with the personality of Godhead? There's no question. Sometimes in the material world, you see how someone may be very proud of their fighting spirit, or someone may be very proud of their intelligence, or someone may be very proud of their beauty. But these are all sparks. They're all coming from the personality of Godhead, because we understand that he's the most attractive, that he's the most intelligent, he's the strongest of the strong. So it's only again the foolish persons who think that that these things are going on without his sanction. And as Prabhupada points out here, the Lord has to come periodically to right the situation. And when he comes with his assistants, and they engage in those sporting activities with him, or loving exchanges. Prabhupada points out here in Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says to Arjuna, "My dear Arjuna, both you and I have appeared," right? Bahuni me vyatitani janmani tava charjuna. That many times Krishna comes and engages in these activities, but the conditioned souls, they're forgetful. They're forgetting that many times we've been through this material cycle. Many times living entities had to experience miserable conditions, sometimes in a very heavenly situation, sometimes in a very hellish situation. But these things are constantly happening, and it's just our own forgetfulness that we're not aware of it. But the Lord, he's quite aware of this, again, because he's the personality of Godhead. He's within all living beings. He's quite aware of what our desires are, and when those desires are contrary to what is our original situation or original condition of service to Krishna, then one is thrown into a separated condition. And even that condition is temporary, as Prabhupada points out here. That a devotee should come to an atheistic family is surprising, but it is simply a show. After finishing their mock fighting, both the devotee and the Lord are again associated in the spiritual planets. That is very explicitly explained here. The conclusion is that no one falls from the spiritual world or Vaikuntha, for it is an eternal abode. So again, that of course is a topic for a discussion, that where did the living entity originally come from? Srila Bhaktisiddhanta comments in his writings that the living being is originally in association with the personality of Godhead. He has a choice. He can enjoy, that meaning that we can come into a place where we can use that independence separately and try to enjoy, or we can cease to enjoy, or we can go back to our original position. And that original position is to be engaged in a bhakti, a devotional service. And that separated condition of being in the material world is, or so-called fall from Vaikuntha, is actually just a dreaming condition. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur again explains that we have a direct relationship with Krishna. But when we want to take his position, then we're put into that dreaming condition. And to enjoy in that dreaming condition, that is, of course, is not allowed in Vaikuntha. So there has to be a situation created where one can go through that dreaming state. Srila Prabhupada comments that can happen repeatedly as well. So sometimes one may be in Vaikuntha, and when the thought may come that, oh, why is Krishna no, you can't, that thought isn't allowed in that atmosphere. So you're put into a dreaming condition, and you have to live out that dreaming situation until again you're reawakened in a place that's separate, meaning the material world. But that condition is just a dream, because we can understand that when we talk about liberated personalities, meaning that they can be either in this temporary world or they can be in Vaikuntha, in either place. But they're liberated, meaning that they're not in that dreaming state of thinking that I'm a enjoyer. Instead, I'm a servant of the personality of Godhead. So there's no question of falling. It's a matter of misuse of one's independence, and then put into a dreaming condition. After finishing their mock fighting, both the devotee and the Lord are again associated in the spiritual planets. That is very explicitly explained here. The conclusion is that no one falls from the spiritual world or Vaikuntha, for it is an eternal abode. But sometimes, as the Lord desires, devotees come into this material world as preachers or as atheists. Atheists being like Jai and Vijay. They're put into a temporary condition where the Lord wants to again experience some mock fighting, so they take birth in a atheistic condition, and that goes on for some time until finally again both the Lord and the devotee are again associated in the spiritual planets. But the conclusion is that everything here is being controlled, it's ordained and by the Supreme Lord, and we have a choice. We can either live in harmony with that, or we can go our own way and try to enjoy in the material world and go through a repeated suffering. But the reality is that it's controlled, ordained by the personality of Godhead, and if we act according to His instruction, then whatever our condition may be, we can be assured of, again, reuniting with the personality of Godhead. So we'll end there. Are there any questions or comments?
Hare Krishna. Thank
Hare
you,
Krishna,
Prabhu, for the class. This relationship is really interesting with Jai and Vijay. This relationship is very interesting with Jai and Vijay, and in the verse it's saying that they'll surely come back to Krishna shortly through mental concentration intensified by anger. And I was just wondering if that elevation in that way is only possible because they're not conditioned souls, and do conditioned souls become elevated in any way by that secondary rasa of meditation in anger, concentration in anger?
There are different rasas. And if Krishna is the center of that rasa, then, as I understand it, eventually that liberation will be awarded. Whether you're in the highest rasa, where your devotion is pure and unadulterated, or whether it's in a secondary rasa, which is influenced by anger or ghastliness, still, because the personality of Godhead is the center of it, just like Kamsa. Kamsa was also in, I believe it's described as ghastliness. So it's whatever the rasa is, because Krishna is the center, that union, that eventual meeting with the personality of Godhead, whether it be at him killing, as he does Kamsa, or Jai and Vijay in their Hiranyakasipu and Hiranyaksha forms, because again, it's the personality of Godhead who's involved. Their liberation is guaranteed. Does that answer your question? Hare Krishna, Maharaj. Yeah, on the bottom.
Yeah, that looks good. Green. Thank you. Thanks for a very interesting class, Naikatma Prabhu. The only point I wanted to make is to tack on the points that you were making, is that originally we're all Krishna conscious living entities, and however there is a desire, and the desire is to want to taste what it's like to be a lord, to have all the opulences of the Lord, thinking that that will in some way give one security, give one peace, give one joy, and give one wealth and riches and everything that one wants. However, the living entity finds out after a period of time, begins to feel that these things, although they bring these opulences, but they also bring lots of misery in the course of receiving or obtaining them. And what happens is when the misery becomes so great, so terrible, so undesirable, the living entity then loses the desire to have those opulences because he knows that the price that he has to pay for them are not useful. And he ultimately has to come to the realization that there's only one God, and that's not him, but he can have many of the qualities of God. So the one God, as we know, is Krishna. That's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So when one finally understands that all he's going to get is more and more misery, and he no longer wants misery, what he wants is peacefulness, he wants happiness, he wants joyfulness, fulfillment, and satisfaction, then he has to take a different path, and that's the path we're on. This is the path in which we are trying to understand God, in which we're trying to please God, to serve God, to honor God, to glorify God, and in other words, to get rid of all the lower quality of wanting to be God, and instead replacing it with the desire to serve God. And if we have this desire to serve God, God helps us to in that service so that we give better and better service, and as a result he gives us better and better blessings and graces. So the ultimate result is, as you were mentioning last, is that because we get this grace from God, we ultimately get the desire to want to go back to Godhead and to serve, not just for one term, but to serve forever, knowing that that's the best place to be, and there's no better place to be, and therefore we are fully complete in that sense way. But if we simply want to go on in the material world, being bigger and better and greater or higher, that's not going to do us any good. You may feel some false satisfaction, but ultimately it will never bring the real satisfaction, which comes from lovingly serving, lovingly giving our body, our mind, our thoughts, our feelings, our everything as a surrendered, loving service to Krishna. When we do that, then we become genuinely happy, and that's the way we stay for the rest of eternity. And we're never dissatisfied. We're always happy.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
There's a nice comment by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur where he states that in this dreamy condition, when we wake up from that condition, from that dream, just as sometimes one may sleep and fall into a deep dream, and as soon as you wake up you realize, oh, that was just a dream. I'm actually in such and such place, and this is me. That when we wake up from this dreamy condition, we'll realize one will be again reinstated in his original position. When we wake up from that dream of wanting to enjoy, instantaneously one is recognizing that, oh, I'm a servant of Krishna. I'm actually a small spiritual spark. There's a lot of wonderful comments by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur about this subject matter, and there's a good number of lectures. You can find it on the database, and some nice instructions that he gives about how coming out of this dreaming condition one sees things as they are. Just again, as a liberated soul in this world, is not really part of it. He's here, but he's not really part of it. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.